No lie, Mike. I was trying to come up with a pun or play on, but I think the only play on here is the Seattle Seahawks. C for every offseason, every draft, probably even less than that. It might be the Seattle Seahawks because that's usually what I grade their off seasons, grade their team, and then somehow they fricking make the playoffs. But we back team recap. We talking about the average mediocre talent somehow always overplays Seattle Seahawks. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good. I thought you could have just said like you could have called them the Legion of Gloom or something. I didn't think
That's
you need to give a 20-second rant about the entire team's history. But no, I mean I'm right there with you. This team does always seem to have perennially suspect off seasons, and this is no exception. So Mike, what were your general thoughts on what the Seahawks did in the draft?
yeah. Real quick, I just want to get my thoughts out early because most people don't make it past that part. So just wanted to get my thoughts out for all five of you that watch. So yeah, that's it. Let's go to the offense.
Honestly,
It's I'm not sure. When we were looking at some players, maybe watching film, man, I'm not sure Jordan Brooks came up. It it's probably the biggest head scratcher of the draft, as
no. Oh,
Seattle
come on. No,
Seahawks
no,
first round
no.
picks often are.
No, no, you can't say that. Jordan Brooks wasn't that bad of a pick. It was he. I don't want to say it was completely out of left field as some like as Rashad Penny was, but it's better than that. Or it's not like a
Rashad Penny, Collier last year, even like players that have worked out. Frank Clark worked out, but like that was out of left field because we had some off field issues. And he is now on the Chiefs where he belongs. But yeah, beside that point, man, they really do not value first round picks.
they really don't. I mean, Brooks is fine. Like the only question I have is where's he going to play in the NFL because we didn't see him. We virtually never saw him working backwards at college. We never saw him flipping his hips and turning and running and covering guys past a running back coming out of the backfield. And I really just don't know how he's going to translate to a team where they love to run that kind of 7-man zone where we've seen the likes of like KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner thrive. I just don't know if Jordan Brooks really fits that kind of scheme. I mean, he was pretty solid from what I saw in terms of like filling against the run. He's a physical guy and he's able to get off blocks. But man, I just didn't think 27, especially when you consider where Patrick Queen went. I I didn't really I wasn't for it. And then speaking of not really for it, man, Darrell Taylor in the second round, that pick was absolutely out of left field. If you want to talk about crazy picks to me, he was completely under my radar. I thought that they would have definitely went for a guy like Zach Bond or Terrell Lewis ahead of Darrell Taylor. I didn't, in retrospect, I don't think it's an absolutely terrible pick. He's a good twitchy athlete, inconsistent first step, and he'll surprise you with his hands. That was one thing that I liked is every now and then he'll hit you with a really nice swim move or a really good bull rush. He does transition speed to power pretty well, but I think that pick would look really, really good in like the late to mid third round, maybe even fourth round, honestly. That's the problem, and you took him in the second. In terms of Damian Lewis, I don't understand it because I thought that he was, you look at the LSU offensive line, and I thought that Lloyd Cushenberry and Sadiq Charles were kind of the more highly regarded prospects. And then you take Damian Lewis before those other ones. So it's like, well, what are we really talking about here? I guess the only pick that I really liked per se would be a guy like Colby Parkinson out of Stanford. I thought that he was a really big body tight end. I believe 6'7". He has a huge catch radius. I don't want to say he has something that none of the other tight ends on the team do because they have like 5 of them, but he has good soft hands. He's not a great run blocker by any means, but he's just another target, an underneath target that Russell Wilson can get the ball to, and I don't mind it in the fourth round. The only question is how much did they actually need it at all, let alone to be in a prime pick in that fourth round.
Yeah, when the Seahawks are picking, it's never a prime pick. Prime picks are probably day 3 because you really don't. There's less questions, but as much questions as there always is with their drafts, they somehow perform. And let's get into performing. Probably the best part of performing is Ben Russell Wilson in this offense. I think this really speaks, and you're usually a little bit higher on him than even I am, but it speaks to Russell Wilson. Just as a game manager, he is the best game manager in the NFL. It'd be hard to doubt anyone else. Um, what he does often with lack of talent, lack of protection, lack of weapons. This might be some of the best weapons he's had to date, and it's sad. Not bad play. I'm not hating on DK Metcalf or Lockett. Um, neither are elite wide receivers. They don't have an elite number one option. They're both really solid. I hope DK Metcalf can develop into that one, that solid number one. But he's not there yet. And Tyler Lockett, I think we've seen him at his best. And how much of that's just elevated from Russell Wilson be able to play ball. Just kind of going over this year, what does Greg Olsen really do for this team? I'm not sure too much. Bad free agent signing. But as much as I'd like to talk crap about this offense, man, they somehow are going to perform next year and prove me wrong, as always. So I'm not even going to try.
No, and I can't speak enough to Russell Wilson's just his value and his ability, honestly. You know, one thing that I always like to say is that somebody's performance is indicative of their talent and their environment. Some interaction between those two characteristics gets you how they play on the field. And it seems like no matter how the cards are stacked against Russell Wilson, we saw it late last year when Chris Carson was down, when Rashad Penny was down, when CJ Prosise was down, and you were relying on Travis Homer and an 84-year-old Marshawn Lynch to to get 20 carries in playoff games. We just saw that man keep that fantastic standard performance. And that's why really when it comes to the quarterback discussion, I'm hard pressed to really put anybody above him. You know, I think now we can kind of say, okay, Mahomes is there, but Mahomes does have a lot more weapons and a lot higher quality weapons and a much better offensive line. You know, I just think that what Russell does with the pieces he has, I think that I can honestly I can humor somebody saying that he is the best quarterback in the league. I really can. I know you're not quite there, but personally I am. I think that in terms of the rest of the offense, I do like Lockett and Metcalf a little bit more than you. I think that at the very worst, it's like you always call it a 1A and 1B situation. Neither of them are high-end wide receiver ones, at least right now. Obviously, Metcalf could develop into one, but they do have really good complementary skill sets. And that's one thing that obviously I always talk about. You need somebody who can do everything. And there's very few Julio Jones who can do it all in themselves. So you need a variety of skill sets. And DK Metcalf, obviously, he is the big guy who can he can also take the top off the defense. We can also go up, grab those 50-50 balls, those contested catches. And then you have Tyler Lockett, who's more of that volume guy in the short to intermediate game. Just a great combo there, and really one of the best that Wilson's ever had in his career. And then to add a guy like Philip Dorsett to that, I think that we saw a little bit of what he could do in New England, obviously in Indianapolis. I think that's an intriguing piece as a third option. They've never really had a third option prior to this, so it'll be interesting. In terms of the tight end room, I think that the value of Olsen comes in the fact that he is a veteran, obviously. I don't know how many snaps he'll actually be getting, and one thing that we always say is you do need you need a mix of vets and youth to kind of balance out your team. And when you have Disley, Hollister, and Parkinson, all who are relatively young players, even though they all might have higher potential as of right now than Greg Olsen does, I think that that's a good guy who's been through it, who can help them out, help them get the nuances of being really an all-around tight end. Because as we saw, Greg Olsen was a guy who could block, could go out and catch balls. And I think that right now they have a lot of one-dimensional guys like Parkinson or Disley or Hollister as well, and maybe he can help them add that second dimension. Because they really do need to be solid run blockers when you consider this offensive line isn't that great, but then again, it's never really been that great. So I know obviously getting Dwayne Brown has been big, and then you have the Ethan Posick's and Damian Lewis's out of LSU. Maybe they just like the LSU scheme, honestly. I'm not really sure. But like I don't think that anyone's arguing that Cedric Ogbuehi should really be starting or BJ Finney. He's fine, but I do like the signing of Chance Warmack, actually. He didn't play for anybody last year, but that was a guy who, coming out of the draft, he was super high potential, and then even his first couple years in Tennessee. So I have no problem with that signing. I have no problem with bringing Iupati back in terms of, again, just a veteran to help mentor those young guys. Overall, it's not the worst offense in the league, but it certainly isn't the best. I'll just say that.
Yeah, the point that we talked about this whole offense and really didn't talk about the strength, this running back core, I think that's where their strength is. Obviously, Chris Carson, He's kind of a do-it-all running back. He kind of is a bell cow, but he doesn't even need to be a bell cow. They have Hyde and Penny, who Penny started showing up a little bit last year. Maybe he's not a full bust. And then he got injured. I forgot exactly what, but showed some potential. So they have a running back core, and this team is a run first, pass second, and that's what's going to lead them to the promised land, or by promised land I mean playoffs, because this I don't think has enough talent to make it to the real promised land, the Super Bowl, but has enough to make it to the playoffs and compete in their division. So yeah, I think that's probably the strength, and hopefully they can keep that going because they probably have one of the better running back cores in the league.
No, and they have one of the more versatile ones as well. The only question I have is, obviously, Rashad Penny has been a disappointment to this point, but after this season, Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde are both unrestricted free agents. So you have to wonder if maybe they're going to expect Penny to step up and become that volume guy at the top of their depth chart as you'd assume they draft him to be. Obviously you love Chris Carson, you love his story, but at the end of the day, do you really think they're going to pay this guy who's kind of came out of nowhere as an RB1, even though he might deserve it based on how he's played? I don't know if they will. I kind of expect them to go the cheap route with Penny, but obviously we'll see. The one problem that I have with this whole team, though, is, you kind of talked about the offensive talent around Russell's been mediocre at best. It's not that great now, but what we've seen decline pretty steadily over the last couple of years is this defense. So Mike, talk about this defense here.
Okay, on to the schedule. Just messing again. No, this I see some problems here. But I will give Pete Carroll a lot of credit, man. You often see lack thereof talent on a lot of these teams, and somehow he gets them to play hard at a playoff caliber most of the season, and that's how they keep getting there. So I guess just based off talent, this isn't good. Front four, this might be one of the worst we've looked at. I think Jaden Reed showed some potential in 2018, had a drop off in 19. Hope to see that recovery. When he's at his prime, man can stuff the run. He can get to the quarterback, which is kind of deceptive because he is a big body, kind of that one-tech mold, but all around solid player. And Bruce Irvin, they're bringing him back. I'm not sure I feel – I just at this point, what is he going to bring? Is he really going to elevate this team? No. And then LJ Collier, obviously disappointment last year. I'm not sure even if he even played last year. But right now, I might be one of the worst pass rushing duos we've seen. We've seen worse. Detroit Lions. But this is pretty damn close. But I think an obvious strength here is that linebacking core. And I think that's kind of as Russell Wilson elevates the offense. Bobby Wagner continues to elevate this defense. And KJ Wright also just kind of two staples for this defense. Bobby Wagner is the best off-ball linebacker in the league. It's hard to doubt anywhere else than that. That you really can't argue, to be honest. He's just been consistent. He really brings his team together.
No, I agree with that front four. I'm going to touch on that first. One stat that I found really interesting is obviously last year they had Jadeveon Clowney, they had Ziggy Ansah, even though he didn't play very much. This team was seventh. They had the seventh fewest pressures. It was pressures, knockdowns, and sacks of any team in the league. And you've just lost a premier D-end and what potentially could have been a premier D-end at one point in Ziggy Ansah. And now you're going to rely on LJ Collier and the ghost of Bruce Irvin to be your primary pass rushers, and I just don't love it. I think that Collier, he showed some really good traits at TCU, maybe not first round traits, but he showed some talent, and it's going to be an interesting transition for him here. Now he's really the primary guy. I think, as you said, that linebacking core is fantastic. I actually wouldn't be shocked if, given what I said about Jordan Brooks and his kind of not even deficiencies in terms of pass coverage, but just we haven't seen it. I actually wouldn't be shocked if he is going to be their replacement to Bruce Irvin as kind of that Leo position where it's a hybrid linebacker and player. I wouldn't be shocked if that's more his role as almost a strong side 3-4 outside linebacker because I don't really see him being a hand in the dirt defensive end, obviously. But I do think that him going forward, making plays at the line of scrimmage, that's kind of his game. In terms of the back half of the defense, I think it's interesting. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people want to look at it. Obviously, it's nowhere near the days of Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas. But it's not the worst in the league. I think Shaquille Griffin showed last year that maybe he is a low-end cornerback 1, and I think that Trey Flowers showed last year that maybe he is a low-end cornerback 2. So obviously that's not really a recipe for success, but you did trade for Quentin Dunbar from the Redskins. I know he wanted out. Maybe he'll come here and step it up. Maybe he'll even be the cornerback 2. You got Quandre Diggs out of Detroit, who by all accounts now he supposedly didn't want to be there either. I think he played really well once he came last year and looks to continue that this upcoming season. And then Bradley McDougald, he's just solid. He's been kind of the replacement for Cam Chancellor, and he's okay. The problem is that when you have all 4 or all 5 guys are just kind of below par, below where you want them for that position, it's just not an ideal mix. And, we always talk about the best way to improve your coverage unit and your secondary. It's having an elite pass rush. And with no Clowney, no Ansa, no Cliff Averill, there's nobody walking through that door. No Michael Bennett. Nobody's going to walk through that door that can rush the passer anytime soon. So I do think that that's where this defense suffers. And really, we're going to be relying on Russell Wilson and that offense to win games.
Yeah, 2 things. I want to go real touch on that secondary. I think you said below par. I think they're most of these players are at par. So kind of where a little bit I disagree with you there. And I will kind of be a little bit stronger on how I feel about this pass rushing class. I think this is probably the worst we've looked at so far.
No, when I'm saying below par, I don't want you to confuse that. I'm not saying that Shaquille Griffin is a below average cornerback or Trey Flowers is a below average cornerback just for the role that he's going to be playing. Shaquille Griffin is a below average. He's not a top 16 cornerback, or Trey Flowers is not a top 16 number 2 cornerback. I don't think that they're to that point. I don't think that Bradley McDougald is a top 16 strong safety. I think they're just below par for where the roles that they're going to be slot in. I don't think they're terrible players by any means. I think that on good teams, a guy like Shaquille Griffin or Quentin Dunbar or Bradley McDougald would maybe be that 3rd or 4th best player in the secondary. But the problem is here, there really is no clear-cut number 1, 2. There's really no guys that are the force multipliers, as I like to call them, that are going to make everybody else better. That's kind of my problem. Outside of Bobby Wagner, obviously, in the linebacking core.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is when you see corners like Byron Jones getting paid what he got paid, or even Trey Waynes, I think he kind of falls in between that. I think he's a better player than Trey Waynes, Shaquille Griffin, and he's not quite where Byron Jones is. He probably falls somewhere in the middle. So I guess it's just kind of hard to but where does that actually lie and fall for him? I don't really know where the value or where I'd put him there, but that's kind of just how I feel about him. But probably too much talking about this, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how mediocre your team actually is. It's about winning games, and they seem to do a pretty good job at doing that. So, Mike, what are some games maybe you're excited for? Las Vegas odds, as you like to mention.
So,
give me it.
In terms of games that I'm excited for, I think that the first one will really be that September 27th game. Obviously, whenever Dallas is on the schedule, we seem to go to them because they were a fantastic offense and a pretty good defense. So I think that for any team who expects to make a playoff push at all in the entire league, Dallas is a solid benchmark of, you already know that is a playoff caliber team. So to play them early in the year, it's going to give you a clue as to where this team lies. In terms of, Dallas, they had that great offensive line. They have that running game. They have those receivers. Now, how is this potentially below average secondary and this bad front 4, how are they going to stack up against those players? I think that'll be an interesting test to see, but obviously you can never put it past Russell Wilson, And then another game that I'll mention is, I know you touched on it in the last video, that Week 17 game against San Francisco. It seems like every year that, the Seahawks are fighting for a spot late in the season, a playoff spot late in the season. And it's likely indicative of the talent in their division. And I don't know if this year will be any different. And in back-to-back weeks, they go Rams and 49ers, So that could be, they could potentially be fighting for tiebreakers over wild card seeding, or potentially for the division, So I think that both of those games will be really interesting towards the end of the year.
No doubt. And just looking at the schedule, I think it's kind of sad because this isn't like I wouldn't say talent-wise they're really a 10-win team, but I could see them somehow swinging 10 wins off the schedule. I don't think it's easy. I really hope not to see it. I hope it kind of mediocrity kind of hits Seahawks, and that 12th man in the face, but it might not. So I just want to say that the schedule is pretty easy. Probably got one of the best and easiest out of the division that we've looked at. So, but a game I'm looking forward to. I think November 30th, the Eagles. That's going to be a fun game at Philly. It's going to be a tough game. I think it's kind of interesting. Probably two teams, but they might not be in the best for their division. They both could be battling for a wild card spot. That could be a really, obviously it's not late in the season, so we might not have a full picture, but it could end up being that game that kind of decides who gets that last wild card spot, or maybe seeding. I think that could have some playoff implications. So I think it'll be a fun game to watch. Kind of Monday Night Football. So I will be watching. But a game I kind of hope that the Seahawks get, kind of smashed in the mouth. I think the Buffalo Bills. I think that's a matchup that doesn't work well for them. Stout up front, can stop the run, and I'm really hoping Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs can kind of break this defense apart a little bit, and then Singletary kind of coming out a little bit. I think that might be a game that you're a little bit surprised, and the Bills might lay a whooping. I'm hoping. I'll mention one more kind of little bonus because I'm interested to see, not necessarily for the Seahawks standpoint, but for the Cardinals standpoint, both of the Cardinals games, I'm interested to see really where they kind of lie. I think that both of those games will say a lot about if the Cardinals have made progress and if they are if they are going to be contenders or they're going to be pretenders.
No, I agree with a lot of that. I think that the one really interesting game that you brought up is actually that Bills game because, with this Pete Carroll defense, what they're mostly known for is playing just deep zones, not letting anything ever get over top of you. And you have one of the strongest arm quarterbacks in Josh Allen and two guys in Stephon Diggs and John Brown who can absolutely take the top off the defense, So I think that that'll be a really interesting matchup between two teams that I think we both believe will probably be fighting for playoff spots late in the year. Another one that I kind of wanted to mention that you didn't was the Vikings on Sunday Night Football, October 11th. I think that we don't really know where Minnesota's going to be this year, considering they've lost a lot of pieces on defense as well. I think these are two teams that match up solidly well. They're going to be more run-heavy with Dalvin Cook, Chris Carson. You have some solid receivers, nothing crazy. I just wonder who's going to be able to take advantage of the opponent's defense more, the pretty solid Kirk Cousins or the great Russell Wilson. So what I'll say off that, though, is if you think that Mic'd Up is great, as always, leave a like, comment, subscribe. I would say comment your favorite team to do in a future video, but now we officially only have 4 left. We only have the AFC East. I don't know how many fingers you just put up, Mike. It looked like 3. It looked like 5, but we have 4 left. So, Mike, if somebody does say, though, hey, do the Miami Dolphins next, which video are we posting next?
Not Miami Dolphins. We ain't doing that. No way. We're skipping that. We're going right to the Bills.
We are doing the Miami Dolphins next. So ignore him. Ignore his ignorance. He's just excited because he got a new car. Mike, you're ready to get out of here and go honk your horn or whatever you're going to do outside.
Damn right. We mic'd up. We mic'ing out. Deuces.